What's up, North Carolina, and welcome to the Liberty Inc. podcast. I'm your host, Mike Ross, and with me today is Chris Cole. We're doing something a little bit different. You may notice this is actually live. This is the first Liberty Inc. podcast. So Chris Cole, he is a libertarian activist. He is the host of We the Parents podcast, which is actually kind of bringing a bridge between the libertarian community and the shared parenting movement. We'll get into more of that, but Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Oh, thanks for having me back.
Yeah, dude. And he brought it up. So to everybody who may be watching this, we actually had a really good podcast filmed the other day. But my 10-year-old was playing Fortnite on the computer earlier, and there was like an audio setting issue. So when I
blame it on the
to
children.
Yeah, blame it on the kids, right? For the family law podcast.
This is a family law podcast.
Yeah.
Let's blame the kids for the problems
blame the
that we're
kids
having.
for all the problems. Yeah, but Chris was generous enough to say, I know we already did this week, man. But he was generous enough to come back on the show, and I said, well, let's kind of make history here. Let's make it live, right? First ever live show. So if anybody shows up kind of here live, I know viewership, not everybody watches it like right away, but if anybody shows up, we can see your chat. We're happy to engage and answer your questions, and maybe this will become a more common format here on the channel. So Chris, man, welcome to the show. And I typically start everybody out, and I know the answer to this one. In fact, I know the answer to most things because I've asked them the first time around. But anybody viewing doesn't. So I'd love for you to just share your path to the Libertarian Party and kind of what brought you here, where'd you come from, and yeah.
Yeah, man. So I was not political at all, which is why I'm a libertarian. I'm not I don't care. But when you're a 35-year-old father who goes through the family court system and your kids are taken from you, or your access is restricted and you've not done anything, that's a pretty passionate issue, family and your children, that makes you want to sort of get involved and learn a little bit more about politics and government and how it actually functions. For the most part, I think most citizens try to just work hard, live well, pay their taxes, stay out of prison, and enjoy life on a day-to-day basis. And then, sort of try to manage the chaos and debacles that government creates, whether gas prices are shooting up or crime is on the rise, or people, there's chaos going around, or we're starting wars, or we give Afghanistan back to the Taliban, whatever the hell government screws up. And we just watch our TVs and go about our lives and try to numb it with booze or whatever the hell we use to cope with the fact that our government sucks. This was not something that I was able to bury my head into, or just sort of go, oh, that just sucks. I lost my kids. No. So
when the government hits, when the government hits you, right? Like it's as a human, it's kind of easier to glaze over it. Like we've been hearing for so long, all the bad shit our government does, right? But
yeah,
when
terrible.
It hits you and it impacts your life and rips something as important as your family and your children away from you, I can see how that can take someone who's like apolitical, right? Doesn't give a crap about politics and says, wait a minute, the state is now being weaponized against me. What can I do to stop it from happening to me and anybody else it's being weaponized against? So, I mean,
and not just me, my children.
Yeah.
Like of all things, libertarians, we talk about individual freedoms, and, we talked about this the first episode, and you had a good point. I said, shouldn't libertarians care about families? And you said, well, some do. And then, maybe some had bad family experiences and aren't all about the family. And then you mentioned that you have a very strong knit family and a marriage, and you're a dad, and you're all about that.
Yeah, I mean, I could just personally relate, but even where I say, even if it's a and we got into this in kind of the first one, where even if it's a libertarian who doesn't look at it and say and view, the traditional family, right, or the roles of family, or as something that's important, I think that along the lines of like self-ownership and living the life that they want, like if it's important to you and it is your family, I feel like even if, hey, family's not all that important to me, but as a libertarian, I'd be like, you know what? but it's important to this person who's also, you know, and if the government is infringing on it, that's why I think, like, even if it's a libertarian who's maybe not super into the family structure and the importance of family, because there's some who are just,
Right.
you know, but
Well,
even
I
if
mean,
not,
you can break it.
yeah,
You could break it down to something that I wouldn't refer to it this way, but some libertarians would say that your children are your property, at least until they're old enough, not until they're paying their own bills. These our children are the most important things on this planet. Even when we're talking about individual rights, if you don't have the right to protect, to raise, to teach your own children, what country do we live in? And unfortunately, I'm not so proud of this country anymore, at all. I think we've done a lot of amazing things, and I think a lot of bad people wound up getting into power, as bad people do.
yeah,
It's the nature of humanity to think that, and the founders knew this, to a degree. The Constitution, all of this was created, not to let government, control us, but to make sure that we control our government. Government's here to protect our rights,
yeah,
not tell us what our rights are or aren't. They're supposed to listen to us. They're not supposed to violate our rights. They do it constantly in the light of day. Especially with technology, we're walking news reporters.
yeah.
You know what I mean? There's not a single human being on this planet that can't record the news everywhere we go. And, it really is shocking to me. And I'll speak to libertarians and those in the shared parenting movement, because I have people reach out to me constantly. They see me do these broadcasts and they're like, I need help. I need a lawyer or this, that, and the other thing. And, I'm still going through my own case, trying to navigate things. But what I am doing is I'm calling out the system.
Yeah.
And I am fighting in the courtroom, and I've almost been thrown in jail because I spoke up, which, guess what, isn't okay. That you just hold people in contempt,
Sure.
because they're standing up to you. You're a judge, you're an attorney, you're public servants. You're not my father, you're not my boss. Yes, there is a certain level of respect, but even if you're disrespected or you feel offended, you don't throw people in jail because they're saying, hey, quit fucking around, give me my kids back.
Yeah, freedom of speech unless you're in front of a judge, right?
What in the hell?
Yeah. You have the freedom to speak, but if you say something the judge doesn't like within this formal procedure that in many cases you're dragged to, right? You say the wrong thing.
I didn't want to be there. I'm not a criminal. I didn't do anything. I'm there for their help, not to be abused.
So one thing I wanted to get to, which we didn't get to go to, which part of me thinks that maybe it was fate that caused our pre-recorded episode to disappear. But there's one thing, and I've talked to a couple of people, done a little bit of reading, but and I put it in the title of this podcast, right? That family law, as you've described it, is a winning libertarian issue, and anybody who knows me knows, like, I'm in finance, I'm a numbers guy, and I know that you've been doing this. You've got a podcast that this is the topic, that's there. I'd love for you to share with anybody watching this, like, what are the statistics, right? Like, how many people in America are dealing with some of the bullshit that you're dealing with right now, or have dealt with it and either had a good or a bad experience? I would guess most of them, at least half of them, probably had a bad experience. But
yeah, so of those that have children, I guess there's 326 million Americans in this country.
Right.
About 20, you hear different numbers, anywhere between 22 and 25 million parents are going through something like this. We're talking anywhere between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4. So we'll just say 1 in 3.5 people who have children in this country are dealing with custody issues. I'll give you the quick snapshot numbers, and again, they're within a percent or two. I'm not too far off.
And they change with every day, right?
Yeah, I've seen numbers from 2019. I've not seen 2021 or 2020 numbers yet. But the numbers that I just have seen over the years is, 85% of custodial parents are mothers, maybe about 84%, and only about 12% are fathers. And then 90% of your welfare recipients are single moms. So basically what you're seeing is the creation of socialism using using a father's income, collecting child support. That money gets matching funds. It pays for social services, it pays for state courts, it pays for judges. But what they do, the way they feed this machine is through federal funding, through Title 4D of the Social Security Act. And we can get into that a little bit later, kind of what that is in a nutshell. And then, obviously attorneys, from a private entity are sucking up tens of, if not hundreds of thousands. And you're talking about celebrities and those who make six figures pay millions.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard people reach out to me that said, I've been fighting my court battle for 6 years and I've spent $1.5 million on litigation. And they're not criminals. They're not, you know what I mean? These judges, these courts are taking away children or limiting their access for nothing other than a conflict of personality or character, or the judge doesn't like my face, or the fact that I don't fear him. So he thinks I'm mentally unhealthy because I know his actual role, and his role is not to, attack me or my children. Sure. His role is to protect me. He's not doing his job. And because I don't fear him from a sense like, I don't want to go to jail. Like I fear that happening, right. But that doesn't stop me from saying, hey, this is wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to go to jail, but if someone was, if it was like, hey, I've got your kid. If you try to get him back, you may get him back and you may go to jail. I'm coming, right? Like throw me in jail.
Yeah, no, I'm still coming, dude. I mean,
so and as long as they dangle that carrot of, hey, maybe we'll let you have your family back, right? Like you're going to risk anything there, unless until they basically completely remove the carrot, right? And then, then you have other issues there. But
yeah, a lot of fathers quit. Man, and emotional stress, financial stress, it keeps them frozen in life. They don't move on. They have hard times if they don't let it go. Like they have trouble with relationships.
Yeah.
They have trouble with moving on. Just breaking apart. They stay sort of trapped in a broken relationship as far as its dysfunction. You're still sort of hanging on to this tit for tat, this he said, she said, trying to just see your children. So a lot of these dads, mostly men, and I always say that it happens to women too, ladies. We know it happens to you. This is not a gender issue, except for the fact that it is completely lopsided. Vast majority. We're not talking 55% and 45%. We're talking 85-10, 85-12, 85-15. Whatever it is, it's completely lopsided. It does happen to women in certain instances where, maybe the man knows the judge or knows the attorney, or he's got more money, or who knows, or the judge doesn't like women, whatever, or mom's an addict. That's always the one. Well, if mom didn't get the kids, it's because something's really wrong with her, and that's not always the case. But primarily, fathers become paychecks only. And the weird thing is I've spoken with some of these older men. I'm 38. I think you're about the same age.
39. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. And, these guys that are a little bit older than me, maybe in their 50s, maybe they're in their 60s now and their kids are my age, say, yeah, I went through that too, man. It's a bitch, but you'll get through it. I have a great relationship with my kid now. And I'm like, oh, how old's your kid? They're like 35. Yeah. I was like, oh, when did you go? Oh, when he was like 26, we started hanging out again. I'm like, so you didn't raise your kid? You're just okay with that.
Yeah, it's sad, man, and that happens, and that's one of the things. Like before we filmed the first one that nobody will ever see, it was basically just a good hour and a half conversation between us. You kind of hear the story, and it's like you always think, well, is this guy just a disgruntled dad who didn't like the way a judge went, right? And I said, but you told me some specific things, right, about your situation with what happened specifically around basically evidence being admitted and coerced and those things. And it hit a bell with me where one of my best friends dealt with the same thing. He got a divorce, and he described to me these same things, and I'm like, wait, so now I'm seeing a pattern, right? Like in his, you talked specifically about like evidence fabrication and things like that. Well, what happened to him? And I told this to you last time, and I'm going to tell this story again because I think it's relevant, right? Where he and his wife. Some people at the end of the day, they like to relax, right? They'll have a glass of bourbon. Some people smoke weed. Some people do whatever it is, right? Like I'm a libertarian. Right. I don't care what you do as long as you're not hurting anybody or hurting their stuff. So right. So they both, kids go to bed. They'd smoke weed at night together, and they had for years. So they're going through this situation. He made the mistake of basically trusting her lawyer, right? Him thinking, oh yeah, we're going to go through this. Everything's going to be fine. I think with the expectation that most people would go into, right? Like, yeah, we'll have 50-50. We both love our kid. We're going to do this together, right? So he goes through the process, and her lawyer comes over to him and says, I want to drug test you. And he goes, well, we both smoke weed. What's this about? And she goes, no, I know that. We just need to prove to the judge that you're not doing hard drugs like cocaine and all of these things. So he agrees to it, right? Like an idiot. He agrees to it, and he's like, and his thought process is like, well, we've been smoking weed together for like 5 years, right? Like, so that's all that's going to show up in my drug test. So
surely it will show up on hers, right?
Right, yeah.
That's what he's thinking.
The same thing. Yeah, that's what he's thinking. So he goes through that. He gives a drug test. Surely enough, they find weed there, right? Well, it turns out that the attorney, right? And that's what I think bugs me the most is that this structure, because the government has incentivized it financially, and the attorney industry realizes how profitable it is. Like the attorney, like he thinks about this, like his ex-wife, like was it her idea to stop smoking weed, delay this drug test through like, amending court filings to push it back a little bit and coming in to do this? He's sitting there thinking, is this her idea? And no, of course not. Like the lawyer went in and made her, okay, you're going to stop smoking weed now, and we're going to use this as the leverage to get you full custody. Right. So now here he is. And it was, and I hope he's not listening and doesn't get mad, but he's remaining anonymous. Right. His situation's a little different too. When they got together, she actually had a 3-year-old. Right. So 3 years old from a prior marriage. He loved that kid like it was right. They got married. He had another kid. That was his son. Right. And immediately she was like, we're going to have a custody battle over your biological child. Right. But this one that's not yours, even though for years that was his son, right? Like that was his son. It may not have been it, but for years they were married, I think 6 or so years, 7 years maybe. And he had a great relationship with his son. Nope, that's not his son in the eyes of the law. So they were fighting over his daughter, right? And then she used this
and they don't realize, well, you're still destroying a relationship.
Yeah.
Even though that might not be the biological father, they don't realize how much trauma that they're causing children by just going, oh, well, you weren't their real dad, or you weren't their real mom. You guys are broken up. No, you don't have any custody.
Well, and he did what you said so many dads did, right? Where he went through this system and he fought for years dealing with child support. And then eventually he kind of had to just hit this sign of like, look, the courts have kept it away. Their mother's there to, constantly kind of have that, brainwashing effect that, if your kid's with you 90% of the time, you have a pretty good chance of influencing the way they think. And he just he kind of threw up his hands and said, like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm getting nowhere. I'm going through all these things. He had to file for bankruptcy, all this shit. And he's just like, look, when they turn 18 and their mom can't keep them away and I don't have to deal with this, I can try to with both his biological daughter and his son. And I just think, in the grand scheme, like, this is like 10 plus years of that child's life that relationship is robbed from. And you talked about just statistics, right? And sometimes people get mad if you give them uncomfortable statistics. But there's some uncomfortable statistics, but they have to exist for a reason, right? Like the statistics exist, and you've robbed children of a loving parent, right? Like if the dad is a deadbeat and doesn't want to provide for them and doesn't want anything to do with them, like, okay, we're not going to force someone to take care and force someone to be involved, right? Force someone to be involved. But if someone wants to, why is the court system doing that?
Well, I mean, don't think for 1 second, and I've done a lot of research and spoken with psychologists and stuff too. One of the, I'll just rattle off some
Yeah.
information is, this is one of the steps towards communism, the destruction of the family. When you take the man out, the protector, you take out a lot of the men. There are mothers and fathers for a reason. Both add to the dynamic and character and upbringing of a child. Daughters get something from fathers, the sons get something from fathers. It's not all about oh well, mom's the nurturer. She carries that whole doctrine. Can't even remember the name of it off the top of my head right now. The tender years doctrine.
Right.
What a bunch of can we cuss on this show?
They haven't told me I can't, and I have a couple of times. So I mean, here's
Oh.
the way I see it is we're here to grow libertarians, and the reality is if you're a libertarian voter, which is what we're trying to grow, you should be 18, or otherwise you can't vote. So I try not to be excessive with it, but yeah.
Oh yeah. I find passionate moments, but I lost it, so we'll skip that. But yeah. So it creates socialism. You're removing the father. What's happening to these kids that are growing up fatherless? They use the term toxic masculinity. Well, toxic masculinity actually exists from lack of masculinity. Those young boys that are committing mass shootings, sexual assaults, committing rapes and indecencies with minors, and have confused sexual issues, and even young women who are very promiscuous. They're growing up looking for men at a young age. They're getting pregnant before 18. They're having mental health issues, anxiety, ADHD. A big thing with ADHD is the lack of postponed gratification. Fathers are the highest generators of postponed gratification in children. That's just because that's what we do. If your kid doesn't eat his food, you say no. If dads are easier at no. We put our foots down, we discipline a little bit better. That doesn't mean that there aren't moms out there that aren't excellent discipliners, because maybe they were raised by a really strong father, and there are stories but for women who grew up without a dad, they lack discipline. Which again, that's why they're out there being promiscuous. They're looking for men, they're to get their value from men, and they don't always pick the best men to find this. So this whole fatherless epidemic, and it's we talk about the behavioral issues, the suicide rate, the drug overdoses, the mass incarceration.
Yeah.
Most of the people in our prisons are fatherless boys who grew up, became fatherless men, or their dads were in prison. And we get into the drug war. We talked about drugs. I'm not a fan of drugs. It's not like I never smoked a cigarette. It's not like I've never had a drink.
Right.
I think I had a Percocet one time when I was like 16. That was stupid. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So drugs are just not my thing, except if you exclude alcohol and/or cigarettes.
Sure.
Even those, I've sort of kicked those a little bit more to the side.
I'm not pro drug. I'm just pro legalization of them, right? Like I don't think anybody should smoke crack. Like kids or adults watching, right? Like don't smoke crack. But that being said,
don't drink bleach.
Right. Like, but the alternative is like, okay, so yeah, we know crack is bad, but if you look at it from a legal standpoint, it's either, is it better for it to be legal or illegal? So it's like, okay, well, if it's legal, this person can harm themselves with crack up to and including killing themselves, right? Killing themselves or ruining their life. Well, the alternative is, okay, it's illegal. So now we're going to throw this person in a cage, put a pile of charges there that are going to prevent them from ever going back out into the real world and having like meaningful, gainful employment that can, improve their economic status. So it's not like you're going through the legal system with drugs and not having a similar destructive effect. Like, you're still ruining their life. And I joked to somebody the other day about this, where I said, if within the war on drugs, if you were taking people and arresting them for drugs, and they were going to jail for a short period of time, and they were coming out with like advanced degrees and becoming scientists and going through some crazy rehabilitation where it's like you're busting this kid for pot. 6 years later, he comes out and cures cancer. Right? Like, if I saw evidence like that, I'd be like, whoa, maybe I need to rethink my whole thought. But I just look at it from the standpoint of, like, you put somebody in jail for drugs, it's not like you made their life better. Right? You didn't improve their situation. It's like you went from, like, a shit sandwich to a shit taco. Like, it's still...
Right. Well, the whole criminal justice system, and I agree with that. I think criminals should be punished. Dangerous people should be kept out of society. But when someone hasn't harmed anyone and, they're high, and they're at their house and they're not hurting anyone and they've never hurt anyone, maybe they're hurting themselves. Maybe it's hurting their health. We do that every day when we go to McDonald's.
Right. Yeah.
To a degree. So it's just to create criminals. It's just to create money. It's just to generate profits. It's just to generate litigation. A lot of laws are just revenue generators. They have nothing to do with safety. I saw a meme one time where a motorcycle cop pulls over a guy on the highway for not wearing a seatbelt. Right. And the motorcycle cop doesn't have a damn seatbelt on.
All right, you're in a motorcycle, dude. They don't even have
So what?
Yeah.
And it says this is how you know it's not about safety. Because it's not.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not. Like this whole thing, and I get that there's a lot of people on a lot of issues. I would think that my personal stance on the whole COVID thing is talk to your doctor, and you and your doctor will come up with the best course of action for you, right? But the whole politicization of that. But you got some people who are like, do it to help others. Well, it's like, that's the same thing like with seatbelt laws, right? Like you're enforcing it to protect like, if everyone has access to the vaccine, right? If the vaccine works and it's supposed to protect you from getting dying, and I know we're deviating from the thought there, but don't worry about like what that person's doing. And it's just that whole thing where it's libertarianism, right? And that's where the family court issue, I think, misses it. And these people, you look at the whole thing where all these issues are political. One of them is like, the whole gender roles thing where they come in and they talk about, breaking down gender roles. And I look at it, and honestly, I think, what? I've looked at the data on there on the whole fatherless thing, and part of me wonders, is it cause or is it effect, right? Because you spouted off some numbers too, where it's like, well, 85% of the of the custodial parenting is mother, right? Like there's just so many more fatherless, and that's where I take the approach of, I've seen that data, but part of me tries to look at it because you said something earlier where it's like, the dad's going to be the disciplinarian, and you kind of have those roles. I almost wonder, is it just single parent? Like, it doesn't matter whether it's the mom or the dad. Because I truly think for a kid, not having, and not even like with gender roles, not having two human beings that care intimately about you and are fully invested. Because like along those lines, honestly, my wife is more of like the smaller disciplinarian. Like, I'm the cool dad who like helps him out, but if there's ever something serious, he knows that it's going to be me, right? So he deals with like, mom is more consistent with that discipline, but intentionally, because I look at it and say, well, if there's ever that big thing where there needs to be a big discipline event, mom's not going to do that. I'm going to do that. So I got to stay in good graces over the little stuff so that I could be the disciplinarian in the big stuff. But I look at it and just say, having two human beings who are collectively invested in your best interest as you're a child coming up, to me, that's like the bigger thing, is just having two people, because I honestly, I know some gay couples that are amazing parents and have amazing kids. And I look at that from the same thing. It's like, they've got two dads or two moms. If they lost one of those, in my opinion, and granted, I've never studied the science, the data science behind this, but I think that child is going to be just as impacted as a kid who loses a father or a mother just because not having. And just but I agree. Having two parents is important because they always add things. I always wonder, because I know the data says that the fatherlessness thing is there, but if 85% of them are just by default, even though we're trying to break down these gender roles, the court system sure isn't. They're sure resting on that 1950s, like the mom does everything with the kids. So let's just give the kids to the mom.
And you're talking about, and this is what's going on, because back then, dad was either off at war, or he was providing. Right. All right. So now we've gotten to a place where I'd say 90% of families, mom and dad both work.
Yeah. Mine does.
I would say mom's at work too. So what are you doing? All right. Well, this is what you're doing. It's an average scenario, my scenario, and many others. So you remove me, you let me be the Disneyland dad, right? So I'm not participating in school activities. I'm not having any phone conversations with my children. I don't know. I'm unaware of virtually medical visits and all kinds of things that are going on. I'm just picking up my kids every 12 days, and trying to squeeze in some fun. We go to the pool, we do this, that, and the other thing. Then when they're with their moms, she sends them off to a daycare or a school where 80% of the time they're being raised. I have boys, but it's predominantly a woman's, career.
Sure.
A woman's, they go to school. 80% of teachers are women. You go to the doctor's office. Most of these kids are being these pediatricians are either women, these nurses, whatever. We're removing the role of men in the raising of the child, and daddy government's coming in and going, look, if you don't want him around, we'll give you this carrot, this child support, this Medicaid, these food stamps, this whatever. Oh, and if you can get them, like in my case, if you can get them diagnosed with some disease like ADHD, we'll give you disability.
Yeah.
Or if they have severe anxiety disorder like you do, we're going to give you money for that, because it's hard being a single mom when your kid's got ADHD and has special needs. So now you've now incentivized Munchausen syndrome, essentially. Like these women are like, oh wait, I can get more help if I can't deal with my kid, or I say he's just acting crazy. Well, why do kids have ADHD? I told you that earlier. A lot of kids have ADHD because they don't have that postponed gratification. That's what fathers bring to the table. My kids act probably different for me than they do for their mother. I acted different for my dad than I did for my mom.
Sure.
So what's happening is, again, 12 days, 24 days out of the month, they're with her during the week, but they're at school and she's at work, right? Picks them up from daycare, picks them up from school, feeds them, bed, do that Monday through Friday. She spends one weekend with them, right? Then ships them out to school the next week. Daycare, school, whoever, no one's raising them. I'm not doing homework with them. I'm not doing anything with them. I'm not helping them with anything.
That bothers me. That bothers me a lot too,
I don't know anything about their school stuff.
Because I'm a homeschool dad, right? Like, and I made that decision where I started my own business, so I had more time margin than my wife, who still works the corporate job. And I knew I didn't want him in public school,
right?
Just because I just from an education standpoint. So we were sending him to private school. And I decided that like homeschool is better, right? Like at the end of the day, do I want someone, we made a decision.
If you can manage that, yes.
Yeah. And I just look at that where, what if you wanted to homeschool, right? Like if you said, you know what, I've got some time margin, and I'm going to just tell you, like as a parent who does this, like realistically, if you can invest 4 hours of your day, right? If you can take 4 hours of your day, and some more experienced homeschoolers will probably be able to tell you they could do it with even less. But where I'm at, I basically carve out 4 hours of my day. I block my schedule, and that's me and my son. 4 hours, and I can tell you, 4 hours with an engaged parent who loves and cares about that. It's 1-on-1, or even if you have two kids, right, 1-on-2. But versus 17 in a better school, or 30 to one teacher, like in that
and
4
8 hours a day doing
for longer period. But that 4 hours.
Yeah.
I come away and I know, you know what, my son had just as good or better of an education than he did at a private school that I was paying thousands of dollars a
Right.
year for, right? So I looked at that and said, boy, I like this, so I'm going to deviate from that. And I look at that and say, if someone took that away from me, right? Like, it's hard to put that because, you know, my wife and I, we've been married, 15 years.
Yeah.
And things are good, right? Like, I don't see
Yeah.
anything coming. But if something happened and she split it up, and it's like, so even if she wanted to send him to private school, right? Like, I don't care if you're sending him to public school or private school. Why? And I would hope that she'd be like, if you're willing to homeschool him and carve that time out of your day, of course, keep doing that. And that, you know, just knowing your situation, like, you have no say. You know, like, even if you wanted to pay to put them in the best school in the area, right? You can't even do that.
I told her that I would work nights so that I could pick them up from school and save the money on daycare and get to spend time with them. She said no. And the courts didn't help me out there either. I said this to the judge the last time I was in court, because during our trial, he said to me that this is the finest system in the world. And I held my tongue at the trial, but then we just had a hearing, an emergency hearing for some nonsense. She was making a claim that I'm intentionally giving my kids things they're allergic to. So I had to go in there and pretty much embarrass her. And apparently the judge didn't notice that she lied under oath and that her attorney also signed this document stating that these things are facts, because they didn't even bring any information or evidence. Not a doctor, not anyone mentioned that didn't question the children. Everything was hearsay, right? I bring in the medical records, and I speak to the doctors myself. Everything was a lie. Every single thing. No one was held in contempt. No one was fined. No one was jailed. I almost got jailed for asserting myself, right, and speaking this way to the judge, like very matter of fact, very confident, and sort of upset. And,
Which
when
is
it was
a natural emotion.
Right?
Yeah. Like when your kids are being
I wasn't like, hey, mother effer, what's wrong with you, stupid?
Right.
Like, I wasn't name calling.
No, it's raw emotion.
Asserting I'm a man, and I'm not, I'm not on trial here.
Yeah.
Although I guess I kind of was, because I was, having these false allegations thrown at me. So nothing happened. So we're doing our closing arguments. And I said, you know what, Your Honor, it wasn't but 5 weeks ago that you said that this was the greatest system in the world. And without this system, there'd be anarchy. I said, I mean no disrespect when I say this, because it's not about disrespecting you. It's about the truth. And I said, this is absolutely the worst system on this planet. I was like, the fact that a father like me cannot have his kids be brought in here on false allegations, disprove those allegations, still not gain any ground with his children, getting any more time with them, and you don't punish these people that have lied under oath. They've signed affidavits. When they do the motion, that you sign an affidavit stating that these things are fact, right?
Yeah.
Then I catch you lying. And in family court, there is no perjury, apparently, unless the judge chooses. Like, if I lied, the judge could throw me in jail.
Right.
But she lied, and her attorney lied. Nothing happened.
Yeah.
Not only nothing happened to them, but I didn't get any more time with my kids. So it was a waste of time for everyone.
Yeah.
What a joke. It's a garbage system. If you look at actor Craig Ellis, he just came out with a book called The Respondent. And I just started reading some of it, and I may have him on my podcast. He talks about his experience with family law and how, like, he was going through, he's at home one day, and to summarize it, the police come knock on the door. He got accused of doing something he didn't do. He got locked up, thrown in jail immediately, for false domestic violence and all this stuff. And this is the America that we live in, folks, where like you can be accused of doing something without evidence,
right,
and abused, and you're literally fighting from the ground up just to get your rights back. You know what I mean? To be a father or a mother. So I've been doing this 2.5 years, almost 3 years now. I've seen my kids every other weekend. They're struggling mentally. They're seeing therapists instead of their father. I
Sure.
guarantee you, you give me those kids for 6 months, a year, they won't be in therapy. They're struggling with anxieties, depression, fear, whatever's going on in that household with her and her husband. I don't know. But I'm being, I mean, they're blaming me for, oh, well, my son is seeing his podcast. Well, there's porn on the internet too. He could see that. Why are you letting him see my podcast?
Yeah.
This is an adult world.
I mean, the podcasts are definitely not for kids, right?
He's 8 years old. Block the podcast.
And one of the things that I look at when there's, you've obviously been very much immersed in this, and it's not a subject area of my expertise, but one of my things that I like to try to give myself a little bit of credit for is I can, look at any issue, right? Doesn't matter what the topic is, and try to just say, okay, take out any personal biases or opinions and try to just break down what is the libertarian position, right? Because I truly value libertarian thought, libertarian principles. And to me, when I look at this issue, because I look at it and I'm like, well, I think I've got a reasonable enough relationship with my wife and my son that if something happened, I'd like to believe that it would be no problem. Hey, it's 50-50, a week on, a week off, or 6 months on, whatever it may be. But it's 50-50 because we both love and do that. Right. I like to think that way. But to me, that should be the standard, right? When we look at those numbers, and even if there's deviation in the numbers towards the mom, which maybe there would be legitimately, right? Probably not 85%, but but 50-50 should be the starting ground. And from our last conversation and just from people I've talked to, seems like it's not. And that's another topic that I've seen that you post a lot there, shared parenting, right? And that's something that you mentioned, is basically around that idea, right? Hey, we're two people, we got together, we had a kid, it didn't work out between us, we should be able to split, right? I know, from a religious standpoint, some people don't believe in divorce, right? And I look at it and say, hey, religion aside, from a legal standpoint, one, I don't think the government should be involved in marriage in the first place. But if it is, and you have to separate that, you should be able to separate between those two people and say, if we brought life into this world, 50-50 should be the starting point. And I feel like as a libertarian, that's what we should be advocating for. And that's something that you said, is a reality, right? Shared parenting. And you mentioned that there are certain states that actually have looked at the data around all of this and decided, starting with the baseline of let's give it 50-50. They're both the parents. They both love the kid. If one of them shows real evidence, not this bullshit that's easily just, but real evidence, hey, this person is a murderer or something crazy. Yeah. They don't belong with kids.
Yeah.
What kind of legislation does that look like? And what do we need to do? Is this something that we as the Libertarian Party need to say, look, other states have these shared parenting bills. This is something that protects the liberty of individuals, right? And say, is that something that we try to do in North Carolina, right? Because we've got the bigger liberty and libertarian issues, but the purpose of the podcast really on, at the North Carolina level. And I saw that you posted something where it rates
D-.
Yeah, we got a D- as a state for how we fall on
there was
criteria.
There's criteria. There's an organization called NPO, or National Parents Organization, and they are probably the leaders in data collection.
Okay.
And they're like the head researchers of our movement. And that's sort of what their niche is. And they've cultivated so much data and brought in the data and share the data. And the data is without dispute. And what it is children do better, even if their parents are divorced. And they fare relatively well. It's not about having two homes. It's about having two parents.
Sure.
So
two people that care about you. Yeah.
Yeah. The dispute is always, oh, well, that's so hard on the children to go back and forth. Ask a kid who had to go back and forth. It's not about that. It's about having two fit, loving parents. And not only that, but have them be able to figure out whether they can co-parent or they need to parallel parent, which parallel parenting is not co-parenting, but it's It's basically, look, you do your thing, I'll do mine, and these are the things that we will talk about, whether it be medical and school, and your home is your home, my home is my home. You know, we can meet on the middle on certain things, but we're not really talking much.
Right.
And for certain high conflict situations, you know, that's been considered the best option, is what's called parallel parenting. And there's things that get put in place through, you know, the courts or whatever, that sort of checks and balances those things. However, yes, North Carolina has a D- based on the criteria, and all the states are graded. You mentioned a few of the states that have shared parenting as a norm, but another one of the things too is, you know, you would think, why would I need a shared parenting bill? You know, it's 2021. Why are parents not on equal footing? You know, didn't we do
Sure.
the Civil Rights Amendment already? Don't we already have a 14th Amendment?
Right.
Or and all the other amendments that protect you know, your rights to your children? And of course, we're not talking about abusers. So, you know, you know, and those are your two groups that combat shared parenting: your domestic violence groups, your far left, um, you know, radical feminists. Those, they're fun. And that crazy ideology that men are all toxic and should be eradicated. I don't know if these women know this, but we built the world that they want to eradicate us from. Like,
Well, I mean,
all due respect, men built a lot of this world, and to hate men, you know, that ideology is a very sick ideology. Because there's bad men and bad women in this world. Why are we hating a whole gender?
I mean, it goes to a lot of things, right? Like a lot of different political topics where if you get some people, a small group that's really, really loud about something,
Right.
you know, they can get through and make it seem like this rather obscure, you know, position is mainstream because they're the loudest and it gets the most attention, right? And
Media helps that.
yeah, of course,
They,
of
they,
course.
they prop up that domestic violence, you know, women's rights.
And that, I mean, and that's a valid thing. And I mean, and that's the thing. Like, you talk about legislation, right? Like, most legislation is good intentioned, right? Like, they don't come out and say, yeah, we're going to make this law to screw these people over. We're going to make this law to hurt these, you know, this community. Like, it comes out of a good nature. The problem is the road to hell is paved with good intentions, and the government is just ultimately very inefficient at actually solving problems. Where, you know, I look at it and say, you know, what's the solution is you start at 50-50. And we talked about this in the podcast that doesn't really exist but anymore, but it should start at 50-50, right? Like, where the judge should sit down. These people are getting divorced. Okay. Judge says,
how do you want to do your schedule?
Well, yeah. Do you want to be involved in this kid's life? Yeah? Okay, great. Do you want to be involved in this kid's life? No? Okay, great. We're going to just go ahead and go in here. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. I misunderstood. You do. Okay, great. 50-50. How do we want to work this out where it's 50-50 that works for both of you? Right? And if you need some help, bring in a mediator. But that's not what happens, right? Like, they look at it and say, no, you've got an attorney that says, no, you don't want to give this other person 50% of the time. What we want to do is we want to do this, but we'll get you like an extra $2,000 a month if we keep this child away from here between, and that's a problem.
Well, and these lawyers pour fuel on a fire.
Well, you hit a good point though last time where you said criminal law, right? Like if you're, poor person arrested for a drug crime, there's not a ton of money in that for lawyers, right?
All the money's in family law.
Now, well, and you get the exceptions, right? Like I'm sure OJ's lawyers got paid a lot of money. When you have a rich person involved in a criminal defense, yeah, there's money there, but it doesn't take a rich person to be willing to bankrupt themselves for their kids. Like, that's the one thing I look at it. Like, if someone tried to take my kids away from me, I would give everything that I had to stop. I'd lose my business. I'd go into debt. I'd lose my house. I'd lose everything, to exhaust my legal methods. And people shouldn't have to do that. And that's where I think
setup. It's keep in mind these laws, this legislation, these rules, this believe all women, domestic violence orders, that's that they call it the silver bullet in our movement, where you can just allege things, right? And family law works on you know what preponderance of evidence is, right?
Right. Yeah.
51%.
Yeah.
Which basically gives judges discretion. That's really what family law is. So preponderance and judges discretion is how you literally determine the most important decision in people's lives, not criminals, not
Right.
like murder or not murdered. Like, did you do it or did you not do it? It's like, if a judge doesn't like you as a person, let's say that you're a different kind of father. Let's say you're a libertarian and you believe in liberty and you don't believe in the establishment like my judge does.
Or homeschooling, right? Like, if my wife left me, right? Like, I view it as like, I got a degree, I'm a smart enough person, I'm capable. What if she
medical stuff?
Or medical stuff. That's another one.
My ex probably believes in vaccines. Well, I'm afraid that one day, if they approve the vaccine for 8 and 4-year-olds, that my kids are going to get it.
Sure.
But it's not going to be my decision. I wouldn't give that to him. Well, if she wanted to go in there and, she also says she doesn't question doctors. Well, I think that's irresponsible. Absolutely irresponsible. But the judge might think, oh, these are medical professionals. You must be crazy because you question everything that's authority. No, first of all, I don't believe in authority. I believe that you're in a position to protect. That's not authority. When someone does something wrong, then it's your job to make sure that everyone is protected.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you get to determine that I'm wrong because, let's say, I don't believe in the vaccine, or I want to homeschool my kid. You don't get to tell me how to parent. You don't get to tell me I can't question my doctors or my children's doctors or their teacher. And you don't get to tell me that I need a psych eval because I believe those things. And if that judge or that attorney believes that, I'm sorry, this is the wrong country for you.
Well, and that hits on one thing that we talked about kind of in the podcast that wasn't, if you're gonna order something for one person, like equality under the law, like we see it, we hear that as a term in so many things, but in family law, like one of the big things that I've got from talking to you and just other people I've known who's gone through this is there's not a whole lot of equality in the family law system where,
No.
like to me, it's like, okay, you want this person to go for a psych eval? How about we send the other person to a psych eval with the exact same doctor, right? So that, and I get maybe there's some things there like, around consent things. Again, maybe I'm optimistic. Like I wish there was a way to do it without involvement of the court. Part of me thinks if you start with that 50-50 baseline, and you talked about this where it's like, if someone's going to accuse you of something, right? Like, if my wife leaves me and says, oh, you can't let Mike have Liam because he beats the kid, right? Like something like that, right? Make some accusation.
It doesn't even have to be that severe. It could be he screams at them, right, and it scares them.
But I want to use like an extreme example for a reason, in the sense where he beats the kid, right? Well, what is that? Like if I'm beating someone, that's assault and battery, right? Like there's a law against that. So
take me to criminal court, bring evidence,
right? Take it to criminal court. If this person is here, because you know what? Okay, this person beats the kid. She comes up and shows evidence. Look, these bruises on his arm. Provides some evidence. Yeah. Okay, you know what? Now, hey, I may be mad, but guess what? I really don't have a leg to stand on. If they prove that I beat my kid, and now they take my kid away from me, like I could be mad, I could scream at the sky, but it's not in
family court, they'll take your kids without evidence, just based on preponderance and judge's discretion. Sure. That is law. There's no due process. I mean, they're supposed to be, but they just waive it. They don't hold people in contempt for the right things. They hold people in contempt when people are upset and assert their rights because they want you to speak to them as if they're a god and you're not. And I don't think that way. And that doesn't mean that I'm crazy. it actually makes you a bit of a narcissist, Your Honor, or Mr. Attorney, that you think that I need to fear you. Who the hell are you?
Well,
Those are my children.
I wonder if I wonder if it's almost like, he realizes that, right? Like that this person doesn't fear you, and then he's like, you know what, I'm gonna make you fear me because I have the power to take your kids away.
I'll throw you in
like
jail.
You may act like you don't fear me, but guess what? You do fear me because I've got the power to give or not give your kid. And I wonder if that infests their feeling, like where if they get someone who's passionate and says, look, I just want my kids. Like I just want fair. Like I don't want to take my kids away from their mom. I just want to have equal rights to my kids.
Exactly.
And I wonder, I've been blessed in my life that I haven't really had to ever go before a judge, right? Like another thing I want to talk to libertarians about too is, because that's primarily going to be the audience is, a lot of these laws are made by attorneys. Oh yeah.
So it's a cottage industry. Like when I interviewed Spike Cohen, he nailed it. He said, it sounds like a cottage industry to me. They're the ones creating the laws, the statutes of limitations, all the things that a pro se litigant may not understand, rules of evidence, all this stuff. They're probably the ones that came up with preponderance. Well, and because it's their industry, they're feeding their industry.
And the government only wants to help. Like, people look at things. Yeah. The federal, like, if you really think about it, the state as a concept. The
government only wants to help.
Well, the state wants 100% of your money, whoever you are. They want 100%, but they can't set the tax rate to 100% because then you'd realize you were a slave and break through. So they say, you know what? Let's set the tax rate at this level that people will not revolt against us or just stop paying. And then let's find all these other creative ways to just steal more of it. So that's how you get the policing for profit with the drug war.
Indentured servitude. That's what this is. You stole my kids and you extort me for 40% of my income on top of 25% I pay in taxes, or 20% is somewhere in between there. So 60 to 65% of my income goes to taxes and child support, go to government.
Well, this brought me back to our last conversation, man. And I think this is a big one where you talked about when it was getting set up, right? Your child support situation with how they, you would
determine my income.
Right. I'm a numbers guy, right? Like I look at it and I'm like, all right, I'm a financial advisor. So I'd look at it and say, okay, well, what's the income on both places? What's the cost of upkeep? Like I'd think that there would be some scientific formulaic way to approach how to do this. And then you told me this story of how you ended up paying like so much
70%.
More like 70% of your income in child
support. And it was
support.
Based on hearsay and no evidence other than Facebook posts.
Right.
I didn't post how much I was making. There was no financials. It was what my ex said that I told her I made when we were together. And then a calendar that I posted at the beginning of the month, which adjusted. And I also had people that I paid. Right. So it wasn't like I was making all that money. And every gig, some gigs I might have made 200. Some were like free. Some were $50, but or they were 300, but I split it. So it was like 150. And then maybe I traveled to Nashville. So there was fuel costs, but instead they're like, no, he makes $300 a gig times 15. That's $4,000 a month, or $4,200 a month. Oh, plus he works part-time. That's $4,900 a month every single month. And I was not playing that many gigs every single month.
Right.
And I have costs.
Sure.
But that was all they went by, Facebook and her mouth.
Yeah.
They didn't look at a bank statement, nothing. And I went bankrupt.
To me, that's crazy, right? Like,
it's abuse.
And I would think to libertarians, like,
should be illegal.
Well, not only that, like, and this is why, when you told me, this should be a libertarian issue, right? And I look at it and I say, if we're looking at a situation where I think generally, libertarians, we tend to do probably a little bit more over analyzing and thought than most things. We're generally skeptical of government and question a lot just as nature, which is probably what leads us to libertarianism.
Yeah.
When I think of that, when you look at it and say, so essentially, the state is creating a way to infringe on property rights, because like the idea of child support, right? Like make sure that the kid is taken care of, and let's put ideological ideas and perceptions around that on hold for just a moment. Look at the enforcement. What is it? It is essentially the state saying we are going to take your property. Now, as a human being, I say, look, if you bring a child into the world, I think you should be supporting that child to the best of your ability, right? So if you make a crap ton of money, right, but you don't want to be I think maybe in your marriage contract, that wife should have something in there like, well, you're going to, and I think organize it through contracts is the way I see it. But if you're empowering a judge, a single individual who in many cases, not an elected judge, just an appointed judge, to say, I am going to be able to take whatever amount I want. And with these child support, in a lot of cases, they'll, if you got a salary job, right, they do it in garnishment sometimes, right? Like you don't even see it. You don't even see it and have the option to throw that in. But if you're giving someone the power to steal someone's property, right? Now, forget whether it's moral or immoral, again, because that's a big issue. Like, I think drugs should be legal. I don't think people should do them, right? It's like the same thing. Like, I think you should take care of your kids to the best of your ability, and honestly, I think from both a financial standpoint and an investment of yourself. Like, I think that's the right thing to do. But I struggle with the idea of legislating that, right? Like on either front, right? Where it's like, you look at a situation where you may have a dad who like works for minimum wage, right? And they're a deadbeat dad, right? Like a drug addict, whatever it may be. Like you look at it and say, this is not someone who, is providing that much value into this child's life, right? But you look at it from a standpoint of the court system forcing that person into child support, right? Like even through the idea of, okay, they go work for minimum wage, we take half of it, give it to the child, and if not, then we throw this person in jail, right? Like what is throwing, and that's the thing that I'm like, I want that person to take care of their kid, right? But if they don't, like, is throwing them in jail really any better of a situation? The kids know better off.
No,
the kids know better off, and now this person's in jail.
Then they want to know, then they're traumatized because they don't see their father.
Right, yeah. I mean,
you know what I mean? We're just going to throw me in jail, and then what are you going to tell my kids? Well, daddy didn't pay mommy, so now you don't get to see him, kids. You think the kids give a crap about child support? They don't even know why they don't get to see me more. You know what I mean? There's certain things I don't discuss at this juncture at their age.
Right.
All I tell them is that I'm sorry, and then I'm fighting to spend more time with them. And that's it. And if their mom lies to them, I say, look, baby, I'm sorry. I don't know why my mommy said that to you. She shouldn't be saying that.
Right.
Let's go play video games. And that's it. But my 8-year-old, soon to be 9, very soon to be 9, he's a smart kid. Dude, he knows something. He knows something's up.
Mine's 10, and I can tell you just from like those years from like 7 to 10, like just the development I see, they're gonna know the truth, right? Like, I can be sitting down with like someone else who can say all the right things and end up being. There's no getting it past your kids. Right? Like,
no, not if you're living right, man.
No, like there's really not, even if you're not living right, dude, if the kid is around you enough, there's no getting it past there, and they're going to see.
Well, I think the mental health struggle is the two, kids want to believe and trust their inherently, biologically in their parents. So when a mother or a father is telling lies that contradict the relationship that the child actually has, right, with the other parent, but that child fears addressing it with that other parent who's lying, because they're 8, because they love both their parents equally. They don't even understand what's going on. Right. That causes trauma.
Yeah.
And anxiety. And what do you think my kids are in therapy for? ADHD. We talked about where that comes from. Right. Anxiety. My 4-year-old has blah, 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 defiant disorder. You know what that 4-year-old needs? His father. Let's see how defiant he is when he spends more time with daddy. So he's being a little shit right now. All right, give him to me. He's very well behaved. That doesn't mean he doesn't act like he's 4 sometimes.
I mean, they challenge you.
Let him spend more than 4 nights a month with his dad.
Right.
Get him out of therapies. Get him off pills. Get him. What in the world? Why is there a mental health crisis? I don't know. Gee, family courts, Maybe you're screwing kids up. Maybe you don't know, you can't recognize where the true discrepancy in someone's pathology is. They can't tell which parent needs the therapy and which one doesn't.
Right.
They just go, oh, this guy's angry because we stole his kids. He must be crazy.
Yeah. Or whoever has the better lawyer, which is sad, right?
I mean, I'm going in by myself because
Yeah.
I've had to.
Yeah.
I'm not making that mistake this time. This time I got a GoFundMe out there.
Yeah.
If you guys want to help me out with a GoFundMe, and I'll share that all over the place. But we will be in court, and it will not be a local Alamance County attorney, and we're going to be aggressive because after this last allegation that I'm essentially deliberately harming my children,
right,
I'm done playing games.
Well, what's the solution, right? And that's the thing, right? Where I try to think through any topic that we're going to talk about here on Liberty Inc., knowing that we're reaching out to North Carolina libertarians, is like, where do we go, right? Like, is this something that we need to organize around specifically shared parenting legislation, right? Like, if we look at it and say, hey, other states have done this and they're getting better outcomes and they're treating parents more, is that where we focus our effort? Like, how do we try to help solve this? Like, because it's one thing to say, it's one thing to call it out and say, hey, this is crappy, right? But I try to be solutionary as opposed to just being a critic, right? So what can we in North Carolina do to try to either move that D- up toward, towards an A, or try to make the situation better for other people like yourself, right? Like loving parents who want to be involved, who for whatever reason are going through a divorce and a custody battle. How do we, being, there's 45,000 libertarian or 46,000 registered libertarians in North Carolina. Not a huge one, but we've seen with other things, if you get enough people that are really loud and passionate about something, it kind of amplifies, right? Like on a 10 to 1.
If I could get 5,000 or 10,000 libertarians to show up in Raleigh with me and do a rally for shared parenting on top of those parents that I speak to, the ones in the thousands just in this state that reach out to me and ask for help. If I got those parents and those libertarians, and we created libertarians out of those parents, because libertarians grabbed this issue by the balls and said, this is a huge violation, not only on human rights, but on liberty and freedom. And it causes so many issues in society, in mental health. It's destroying the fabric of this country. I would say that, there's a few things you need to do. One, you have to change the dynamic of family law. And the way you have to do that is through legislation. Equal shared parenting is great, but you have to get rid of all the other loopholes that the legislators, which are attorneys, have created. Because just like if you put shared parenting, all right, everyone's starting on 50-50 footing, but we're going to keep the false allegations. So people can make false allegations and you can still lose your kids, right? Then the 50-50 gets thrown out the window. Then you're constantly fighting that false allegation, again, trying to fight from behind. That there needs to be accountability, not only in the courts. One, we need to record. I spoke with Spike Cohn about this. We need to be able to record our own proceedings, audio and video, hold these judges accountable, which I have the audio for mine. I would love to have had a video, but I'll take the audio. I can make a transcript if I need to. I'll subject that to the legislators and let them hear how this judge thinks he can speak to me and disrespect me because he's a judge in family court. I didn't murder anyone. I didn't commit a crime. Right. I'm there for help, and I'm being treated like a criminal. That's the problem. So that's what everyone needs to start speaking out. We need to run for office on this. As a libertarian, we talked on the episode that never happened. We talked about running for office, and I'm going to speak with some folks about that, because that might definitely happen in 2022. I may run for the General Assembly in my district. I've already spoken with a representative. He's a Republican. His name's Dennis Rydell in District 64 in Alamance County, and he supports, because he's a very conservative, libertarian leaning just a really good man. And, if I have to run against him, I said, Dennis, I don't want to even be in politics. And he said, well, don't run if you don't want to run. I was like, no, well, I want to get involved. I want to make change for my kids because I don't see anything changing. And I can't just sit here and allow this. I need to hold these judges accountable. I need to hold these unethical attorneys accountable. We need to get legislation passed. We need to change the family law dynamic. Family law should only be divorce law, which means assets. You're talking about, and children are no longer assets. Okay, they're human beings. They're children.
Yeah. When you said that earlier that some libertarians, I don't see kids as property, not at all. Like that's a human being, right? I mean, I get, from the standpoint of I'll defend my kids like I'll defend my property, but in the sense of like I defend my life too, right? Like that right. I view it as that's my life, right? Like,
right.
And I know it's not me, and that he's an
your kids are an extension of your life. That's a good way to put it.
That's an extension of my life. That's my legacy, right? Like when I'm dead and gone, and I've done all that I can do in the world to try to make things better. Like
that's my footprint.
That's my next generation that's trying to make things better, and hopefully like get more generations trying to make things better.
It's my next contribution.
That's my legacy. Yeah, like that's my long-lasting legacy. Like, I can't take anything with me when I go, but I can leave a mark, and any mark that's beyond what I personally can do is what I've inspired.
And so on.
Yeah, and so on. So I mean that's big. So the big one is, what would it take, right? Like so it would be the North Carolina legislator, and you've mentioned another thing around. You not only have to have shared parenting, but you have to like stop all of this other nonsense. Right. But I mean, that seems like something that, that seems other states have done it, right? You mentioned that I think it was
Kentucky,
right?
Arkansas.
So there's some other states that have done this as a starting point. We know it would have to come through the state legislature, right? So, I mean, is this one of the things that we need to organize around? Like, because, we can envision, hey, we want this system to be fair and just and somehow see into the hearts and minds of both individuals fighting for this child, right? But we have to start somewhere. Is that where you'd like to see North Carolina start? Is in, let's get it codified that shared parenting, and then we can say, kind of like how you said, if people can film their sessions. So you say, like your case, hey, you brought false allegations to take my kids away. I have proven them false. If you had accountability, but is step number one, we need to fight for a shared parenting?
Bill? I mean, shared parenting is number one. Again, there's those other things that you have to address. Right. If my ex accuses me of without evidence, and I have evidence on the contrary, which means I've disproven it. If she says that I'm harming my kids and tries to take them from me, or give me supervised visits, or force me to do a psych eval with her lies, she should be held accountable. A, she should be fined. B, placed in jail. C, she should lose her parental rights. Because if that's not clear that someone has a mental health issue and not me, I don't know what, if a judge can't see what's going on in my case,
right,
that judge needs to be removed. The judges need to, and another big thing that libertarians are all about, and I'm all about too, is removing not only qualified immunity, but absolute immunity. Judges need to lose their immunity. And I understand, I spoke with some lawyer friends. They said, well, if judges, they're not going to get rid of all immunity for judges, because then they'd spend so much time getting, trying to fight lawsuits, because everyone would be suing a judge.
Right.
But if you have the evidence that that judge is acting unethical or unconstitutional, then it's the same as any other citizen. Now, I'm not saying that judges don't have a bigger target on their back because they're judges. So let's be honest, bad people are not going to like the decisions that a judge makes. So yes, we would have to think through that process a little bit. I don't want to abuse good judges. I don't want bad people to be able to abuse judges. I don't think all cops are bad. I don't think all lawyers are bad. I don't think all judges are bad. I'm telling you, my experience and the experience of thousands or millions of others people, this is a problem. It's not one and done, few and far between, just my story. maybe there's a handful of us in North Carolina that are losing our kids. I'm telling the Libertarian Party of North Carolina that if you want to start winning elections and you want to start winning over Republicans and Democrats and independents and parents and children who grew up alienated, you know what I mean? Because these 18-year-old kids went through this crap too. And if you start talking about this issue, this should be the number one issue that everyone's talking about. Everybody. And instead of worrying about whether or not we can smoke weed or change our gender or do something else that's stupid because it's our right to do something stupid, why don't we talk about something that, you know what, we can all, Republicans, Democrats, human beings can get together, libertarians, we can all say, libertarians should want to take this. They should want to take this helm and either use it to win elections and not only just win the election, but push the issue, because that's why we are libertarians. It's not just to win elections. Okay. I know we're a political party, but we're a political party because that's the game that's in front of us.
Right.
That's the game we have to play. We have to join a group and call it a group and say we're a political party. I get it. But at the end of the day, we want freedom and we want liberty and we want to be able to have the right to do whatever we choose as long as it doesn't hurt anybody. And that includes not having our kids taken from us by people who shouldn't even be in power.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I always struggle on those, and maybe that's why I'm not a politician, right? Like I don't get too involved in the overall political strategy of those. My only thought there is, I think that it has broad appeal. Like as an issue, like I feel like it's one of those things that I could sit down with someone who identifies as either a Republican or a Democrat or wherever they are. And I feel like you could too. If you sit down and have a conversation about them with it.
Think about how many Republicans might be out there that lost their kids, but Republicans aren't changing this.
I think it's a topic that you can get anybody. Like it transcends
I would vote
left,
libertarian.
right?
Yeah.
But the question is, right, like that's just where I question it, like if it was like a single issue kind of thing, right? Like I have a lot of support behind it, and I think you're right, and I agree with you, but I do it through the lens of liberty, right? Like I think you're right because I've applied my own personal libertarian thought filter through it. My only question, my concern is like, well, what if you've got someone who is otherwise like a very statist person, right? Like they love that the government is trying to keep drugs out of their community, or they love that they're getting welfare checks and all of these other things that they look at at the Libertarian Party and say, yeah, I really like where you guys are on fighting for family law, but yeah, no thanks, I'm not voting for you guys or embracing any other parts of your ideology. And that's like the one thing that, where I think through, I like the idea of you running for a candidate. I think that's just a good one, but I would just say, my caution, just in the way that I think is, if it's a single issue, I don't know if it's I think it's a winning issue for libertarians. I just don't think it's like the single, I don't think it's that silver bullet, so to speak, because I feel like you're going to find a lot of people who are like, yeah, I agree with you there. But I want them to tax the heck out of that rich guy down the street from me more, right? Like I want them to pay for the roads, and I want Amazon to pay. So that's just my only concern is that it's an issue that resonates so broadly that there's people who can agree with it, not because they agree with it because of the libertarian philosophy behind it. They just look at it and say, yeah, I don't want parents to get screwed out of their kids. Right.
The only thing, it's an issue that polls very high when they've done polling, certain issues, family law. I mean, when I told you the statistics that, 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 people are going through this, think about how many voters that is.
Yeah.
The Libertarian Party could take this issue, and literally get on the map, not just be the third largest party. And when we say the third largest party, in a distant third, like not even on the radar third, but the other ones are so far behind. So we got 1.5 million votes with Joe last year. We got a few more than that. The cycle before, some more libertarians the party is growing at an exponential rate. But we're still way off there. You need the issues that turn the tide like that.
Sure.
And I think this is that issue, it has
that broad appeal. Yeah.
I'll be the guinea pig. I'll run on this issue and I'll talk about the roads and all that other shit that really doesn't so much matter, because at the end of the day, we can all work that crap out in our state governments. And I mean, those things can be definitely discussed when we're talking about people, human beings, the well-being of people, this should be at the top of the list of conversations. With a 50%, almost 55% divorce rate and 40% of children being born out of wedlock. We're just the nuclear family is coming apart, and government is growing, and that's why government is growing. Period.
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks through that and I always question causation, correlation, but there sure seems to be a whole lot of correlation to the point where it comes to that whole thing of the more the government creates a need for government, it's not an accident
and
that all of their policies are trying to push
a
need for government, because the more people that need government further enshrines it's funny, like Jack Dorsey of Twitter, like just the other day, literally like tweeted out nothing other than a link to Anatomy of the State by Murray Rothbard. Amazing book. Everybody should read that book. And if everybody read that book, I think a lot of people would just have that wake up moment.
Yeah.
But that's the thing, is we need to look through the broader liberty issues. And I think this is one that if you apply libertarian thought to, it is one that we should get behind, and I wish you the best, right? If you're running, and I could be wrong. I'm just one guy with my own opinions, right? Like anybody else.
Yeah.
I just think that if that's the only issue, I just don't know if, it may get support, right? Of people who like you in the issue. I just don't know if that's the issue that's going to bring everybody who agrees with you on the issue to libertarianism. Because I mean, I feel like there's several ways you can get to the conclusion that Chris's thoughts on the family law, the reforms needed, are right. I come there from that libertarian, apply libertarian thought to it. Property rights, role of the state in involvement, right? And that's where I think, I like to see less involvement of the state in everything, right? I want to see less. That'd be the one thing. But I wish you luck, man. I think if you can pair that with, or kind of, just integrate the liberty message of why this is consistently libertarian.
I mean, trust me, if I run, I'm going to run on more than one issue, but this will be the first. This will be the top of the flap.
I think it's a big one, especially if there's no Democrats or Republicans choosing a side, right? They're not making it an issue. So if we can make it an issue just based on that thought alone, where this is affecting maybe 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 households, right? If we're being generous, I think you said it was 1 in 4 or 1 in 3.
I think it's between 1 in 3, 1 in 4.
But I'm just saying, even if that's a lot of people, that if they can get onto this one, that's the one. Hey, maybe we don't get all of them.
That's way higher than COVID.
I mean,
that's way more.
As far as people, it actually
affects.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big one. I mean, I'd like to see it. In the meantime, if you're organizing things, I'd encourage. I know you do keep up and post things within the on the Facebook page and things like that.
I do.
If you've got something going on, whether it's a rally or a petition or something there, I'd love to learn more about how do we make a shared parenting law. And it's funny, I'm generally a pretty pretty radical libertarian in the sense where I generally am I don't want any new laws. I don't care what the law is. I want to achieve the desired result by getting rid of a law that enables it. But maybe on this particular issue,
a lot of times I'm talking about making laws that hold the law givers accountable. So laws that protect people from them abusing you. Those are the laws that I'm talking about. I'm not talking about more laws against people. I'm talking about more laws against government.
Right. Yeah, no, I get that. And that's one of the things that I'm I'd almost be okay. Granted, I'd be skeptical of the wording and everything else.
Sure,
of how it
you
comes
got
in.
it.
In generally, I'm just is there something that we could just get rid of that would have the same effect? And I don't think there is. But that's one of the things that I could just be less radical on. Is if we had a piece of legislation that created shared parenting as the standard, right? Like this is where we start at and to move
honestly, this shit's not hard. They've convoluted it and muddied up the waters so much.
How else do you make $1 billion business out of nothing?
$50 billion a year industry. And that isn't including what the lawyers make.
Yeah.
So the lawyers are putting, my ex's attorney gets to pay his bills and put his kids through college, and mine don't get to go.
Right.
Because you've drained their father and all his assets and money.
Yeah.
So by the time my kids are 18, I don't have anything to give them because I gave it to their mother to subsidize what she wasn't earning.
Right.
Or saving or anything.
And there's no way I guess, man, without even opening a whole new box of worms there, but like within that structure there, it's like you're not even able to support the child like in the way that you think is right? Like you just give her money, like and I'm not saying that this is the case in your case or anything else, but like, what's the chances that someone collects child support and is now like going and like buying beer or cigarettes or something that has nothing
making their
to
car
do for that?
Making their car payment, not working 40 hours a week, not working as hard as me.
There's at least a case there that they could be like, well, yeah, I need to make this car payment so I could take the kid to school. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, how many people are like, I get this child support payment for whatever reason because my lawyer told me I could get more money doing this way, and then they get that money and they don't use it one bit on the kid. I would not be surprised that happens across this country on a regular basis.
And that's another thing is there needs to be child support reform, and I'd be all over that too.
Yeah, I mean, I look at it as...
That would make me very popular, actually.
Yeah.
There would be a lot of voters voting for someone who wanted to reform or dismantle the child support system.
I think it's such a complicated issue. That's the thing is, because at the end of the day, I try to think, if you have rational people all across the board, this solves itself. Like there shouldn't be a need for lawyers or anything else. The problem is when it deals with, rational people become irrational sometimes under periods of stress. And there's very rarely something more stressful than divorce, and certainly very few things more stressful than custody hearings for a child that you want. Right? Like it'd be different if you didn't really want your kids, right? Like you're just like, hey, I probably wouldn't have invited you on the show if it was like, I don't really want my kids. I just want to reduce my child support because I'm tired of paying. I probably wouldn't have said, Chris, come. I definitely wouldn't have said, Chris, come on the show. But like, I look at it like, it's not that you're against supporting your children. It's that you want to support your children
in my own home.
Well, and instead of being able to support your children, you're basically being robbed by the state to do that and not even getting the opportunity to support your children. Because, I look at it, does putting a roof over his head, does those things help? Yeah. Is that support? Yeah. But you know what? When he's upset over something and I put my arms around him and give him a hug, or he sees something like something silly, like there was a dead rabbit in our backyard and my son, he's 10, he saw it and he was sad, right? And just being able to hug him while he cries and tells him that's the kind of support that really matters. And there's no way the child support system can get that right. That's they can help provide the roof, they can help provide the food by picking winners in the case, but there's nothing that's going to provide the support of a parent who wants to be supportive. So we've been going long for I know we normally go an hour, man. Any closing thoughts on this one? I've enjoyed, because now me and you, we've talked about 3 hours on this topic now, even though everybody else only gets an hour and a half of it. But I like it. I think it's a winning issue, and I agree with you that it's something that libertarians, again, at the personal level, I don't want to tell libertarians what to do. We know we know you hate that.
See if we can get that. See if that works. It's not perfect, but
you
can see me.
I mean, you don't see kids that are that happy if they're in a situation where, in my opinion, if you've got happy kids like that, and it's not just that, you can stage a photo, but I've seen several things. Like, you've got a lot of kids that.
I gave them.
Every time your kids are with you, they're happy, right?
I give
like,
them a bunch of peanut butter and milk and things they're allergic to before that's how I drug them up to take
yeah.
that picture. Ridiculous.
To me, it's just silly, and I struggle with it, right? Like, I want kids to be taken care of. There's just so many things there, and it's a deep issue, but I really do think, if nothing else, saying we need to make sure that shared parenting is the standard. We need to reform the law in a way that says if you bring false evidence before a judge, I don't care that if it's not criminal, right? Like fabricated evidence in a criminal court is a bad thing, right? That'll get the whole case dismissed and a murderer set free, right? If the cops fabricate evidence and get busted, you can have a serial rapist back on the streets.
Last week, I should have gotten either equal custody or full custody, pending a psych eval. She should have been fined and thrown in jail.
Yeah, I mean,
something.
And that's
you just lied to a judge in a court saying that I'm deliberately harming my children.
See, that's where I don't even know, and that's where I struggle, because like there's a victim here. Like, her lie is creating a victim in you and your children. I just don't know. Like,
they didn't get to see me that weekend. I lost my weekend with them.
Right, but
I haven't seen my kids in like 18 days.
I just think at this point, like, that's the kind of thing where I'd be like, okay, if I envision this perfect world of, like, in the future, right, where, like, shared parenting is the standard, right? 50-50, that's the standard. And you found yourself in a situation where you didn't have that, right? Whether it was through the injustice of the system. But if that happened and you had a hearing and you were able to prove, look, this person is lying, has been lying, and here is proof. To me, that should be, you go back to 50-50. Because I don't, just the same way, and I mean, I like you, Chris. I like that you're libertarian, but, like, if you had full custody, I don't know your kid's mother, like, but I wouldn't want her thrown in jail either, right? Like, I mean, maybe if I knew her, and I knew, because again, there's some parents who, and I just don't know anything about your personal.
Here's the thing: is I could have gotten thrown in jail if I was deliberately harming my children.
Well, yeah, as you should have.
Yeah, right. But if you're going to accuse someone, I think the accusation, if you can disprove the accusation, that the same level of punishment needs to go on the accuser. If you accuse me of murder and you're lying,
I
think you need to make it severe like that, man. You got to keep.
I hate to say this, but I think we're giving too much credit to the clients in this case. Because you know what the real solution is? As I think through this and I try to rationalize it, you know who should really have gotten in trouble for submitting lies before the judge?
The attorney.
And I'll tell you what,
he should have been disbarred.
You start disbarring attorneys, where if someone is there and
then
they're recording, and unfortunately,
because
there's been so many attorneys in politics for so long, it almost seems like attorneys are allowed to lie in court.
They're unethical.
And to me, that should be a problem. Where if you're going to say that a person, right, like that a defendant or a party, since in custody there's not necessarily a defendant, right, but a party involved in the court system. If you're the attorney, put it this way, the representation of that party should be held to the same standards of the party. If the party's going to get in trouble for lying, you shouldn't let their representative lie. And unfortunately, in family court, that happens all the time. So I
mean, they both signed their name on that document as if it was a true statement.
Yep.
They
just say, "Oh, that's what my client told me. I have no reason not to trust my client." That's a BS excuse. Yeah. I mean, that's a BS excuse that's taking all liability and judgment away from someone. And I get why they do it. It makes it easier for them to make money.
Sure.
As you said.
So accountability. Yeah. Accountability on all fronts, with the judges, with the attorneys, with the false alligators. We need accountability. But yeah, I want to get this thing fired up in the LPNC. Another thing is changing the platform on parental rights in the LPNC's platform. I'd love to either get on the committee or somehow submit to the committee a plank addition or amendment to the plank, and have some things added to strengthen, at least the LPNC's stance on shared parenting, and put in that plank, shared parenting should be the standard under it may be 6.1. I know it was 6.1 in nationals, and have that plank added. And I think some things like that written in stone, when I can start pushing as a libertarian and as a shared parenting activist, you give me something tangible that says, hey, the LPNC stands here on shared parenting. We believe that a 50-50 standard is not only necessary, but it's the right of the parent and the child. And frivolous litigation need to be this, that, and the other thing. Like, there needs to be some strong words in writing, I think, in the LPNCs, in a plank, at least, under parental rights.
Well, I mean, on that note, I know, we'd have to look through the process. I'd encourage you definitely, anybody who's showing up for convention, right? I think that's the way to work. That's the best way to get any change done at the party level is, convention every year, right? That's where we choose the best representatives. I think, that's one of the things that I think that's probably the platform, the way to do that. Again, I think shared parenting makes sense, right? Like when I apply my libertarian lens to it, again, everybody's different. Maybe some people will disagree. I'd love to hear from, if any libertarians in the comments, watching it even after the fact. If you disagree, let us know. We love to know why,
I'd
right?
love to talk to you.
But Chris, man, thanks so much. Any closing thoughts before I wrap this thing up? Or
man, no, I appreciate you having me on. Let me talk to libertarians specifically in my state, our state, about this issue. I've spoken to a few. I'd like to speak with more. So guys, reach out. If you see this, share this episode. Find me at We the Parents Podcast. Go also Victims of Family Law. And then tomorrow, if you guys are watching Adam versus the Man, if you're here in North Carolina, I will be on, I think it's going to be noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Adam's over there in Arizona. So tune into Adam versus the Man. I have about a 20-30 minute slot. So from about noon to 12:30, check me out tomorrow on his podcast.
Chris, thanks so much, man. Everybody watching, thanks so much for watching. I see there's like 3 of you have been holding steady for the whole thing. So thank you guys. Thank you, Jonathan Hopper, since you kind of mentioned it there. Thanks for watching our first ever live episode. I think we're going to get back to try to do more of the film ones. But I enjoyed doing it live, man. So thank you so much. We'll see you next Sunday. We'll try to get back to that 6 o'clock time, but we did it 7 today. But we will see you next week. Thanks so much.